Another pair of Russian combat aircraft have violated NATO airspace. Just why is Putin continuing to push the boundaries of NATO? And more importantly, is he trying to signal strength even as he gets weaker? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. By the way, become a member over at Combat Vet News. You guys know I cover a lot of controversial issues on this channel. And so if you want to support me and ensure that I can continue to do this and not worry about the fact that sponsors are kind of bailing on me, I don't need to worry because you guys have my back. So become a member, exclusive videos, uncensored combat footage, and more. Okay. So the Lithuanian president has confirmed that Russian combat aircraft have violated Lithuanian airspace. Now, reportedly, this was a on the spectrum of Russian aggression. This was seen as being fairly minor. In fact, the entire incident lasted just 18 seconds. But again, I want to bear in mind, 18 seconds is not the tiny amount of time you think it is. And remember, both Russian aircraft and Lithuanian aircraft have access to GPS. So, to sit there and say, oh, these guys should have known better or they didn't know is kind of preposterous. Let's join me in seeing how long an 18-second airspace violation is, right? That's a long time, in fact, to be inside of an enemy aircraft, enemy country's airspace. That's the case for Russia, particularly when that enemy told you explicitly that if you violate our airspace, we're going to shoot you down. And the interesting part is that this was both an Su-30 aircraft and an Il-78 refueling aircraft. So it was actually not meant to be surprising anyone, and the Lithuanian Armed Forces thought the military planes might have been conducting a refueling exercises near Kaliningrad, the Russian enclave. Now, 2 NATO fighter jets, of course, that are basically always in the air at this point, flew to intercept, were scrambled, and flew out to the area. But earlier on that day, there was a summit at the European Council building in Brussels where EU leaders endorsed a plan to ensure that Europe can defend itself against outside attack by the end of the decade. The plan is dubbed Readiness 2030. And this is, again, we've talked on this channel about the fact that Europe has spent decades underinvesting in its own independent defense infrastructure. And on one hand, the U.S. for a long time was actually kind of okay with this because U.S. arms manufacturers said, listen, it's very expensive to build an F-35, research and develop it, field it, and bring those capabilities to the fight. And it becomes cheaper when you do a bulk order, right? Lots of things get cheaper in bulk, and that's also true of advanced fighter aircraft or multi-role aircraft. And the arms manufacturers of the world also say, you know what else is great about this is that we are effectively a monopoly on first-rate military tech. They have a little bit of competition from China and a medium amount of competition from Russia, but a lot of these countries, they want the best, and the U.S. makes everything that is literally 30 plus years above anyone else, right? No other country has a stealth fighter aircraft that is operational, and the U.S. has been fielding them since literally the early 90s, right? We had the first Nighthawk, the F-117 flying missions in the first Gulf War. So we're 30 years ahead of anyone else. And so the Europeans frequently said, we're happy to just buy our own. It's a little bit like saying, hey, do you really want to spend your time and effort growing food from scratch in your backyard when you can just go to a grocery store? And the U.S. says we are happy to run the grocery store. But now the Europeans are realizing, hey, sometimes the grocery store says they're closed. Sometimes they say, hey, we actually aren't going to sell you the bread. We're not going to sell you the eggs. We're not going to sell you the things you have depended on us for. And so the Europeans say, shit, now we need to turn our backyard that we've spent a whole bunch of time and money turning into a different economy, mostly a welfare state, if we're honest, and turn it into a combat, something that can produce organic systems on par with, at least on par with our adversary, Russia? And the answer is the Europeans think that their breakneck plan is to do it in 5 years, which is insanely slow, in fact. And it's a testament to just European bureaucratic and underinvestment, right? That's probably the best case scenario, and it's still not very good. The funny thing, though, is that the advantage that they have is actually the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainian army of today can fight the Russian army of today to a stalemate, and that's not nothing. And so if the Europeans can get away with it, they'd like to just clone the current Russian solution, or the current Ukrainian solution to Russia, right? FPV drones, light infantry assaults, small teams, etc. But easier said than done. Again, you're talking about a plan that won't be ready until at least 2030. And so the question you got to ask yourself, though, is why is Russia choosing to engage in this airspace violations? One is that it is a signal to the Europeans that whatever the U.S. president does, Putin will not be intimidated. He's saying that Putin will not be intimidated by President Trump. President Trump is not going to protect you. You are going to be continually threatened by us, the Russian Federation. 2, Putin's trying to project strength, even as his country appears to be economically weaker and weaker. And that's worth pointing out, is that Ukraine has in no way reduced its strikes on Russian oil refineries. We literally haven't been covering them as much because they've become routine. In fact, Ukraine has started calling them, quote, drone sanctions, because instead of relying on a oil purchaser to not purchase the oil, Ukraine simply says, why don't we just have the drones pull it off the market themselves? And this strategy has resulted in a really meaningful reduction in Russia's ability to continually produce gasoline, its most profitable petroleum product. And this has been, most data shows, pretty bad news for the Russian economy. Yet, Putin needs to continue to project strength. We saw this by the fact that Trump kind of repeated the Russian talking point, saying that his economy is great, that he is strong, that he is capable. When, again, if your economy is great, you don't need to go around flexing it. It sort of is self-evident. And it's evident. The evidence points overwhelmingly to Russia's economy being in incredibly poor shape. So I think the takeaway here is that Russia is meant to signal to the Europeans, hey, I've been in no way deterred. I've been in no way eliminated. He says, I'm just as capable as I've ever been, and I have every intention of continuing to threaten you guys. And remember, the Baltics especially, these are countries that Putin believes are rightful dominion of the Kremlin. And so he wants to signal to them that not so much that we can conquer you at will, but that we don't need to conquer you. We are so potent and so powerful and so capable that we are going to continue to intimidate you and to coerce you to try to get you to do what we want. As we talked about, you don't need to coerce a country. You don't need to invade a country to get them to do what you want. You can just coerce them. It's like President Trump himself has said. He said, if I was president, the war wouldn't have happened. But what that means is that Russia would have massed on the border of Ukraine. They would have demanded the surrender of the Donbass, or the capitulation of the Ukrainian government. And when the Ukrainians called the Europeans and the Americans, we would have told them, hey, man, help isn't coming. You should probably just give them what they want. Make a deal in Trump parlance. And so that, knowing that if you call your friends and they're going to tell you, good luck out there, you should just surrender, that is simply a best, that is the decision that Putin wants these countries to come to, because it allows him to conquer them i.e., gain diplomatic, military, and economic control over them without firing a shot. And even better, he doesn't have to go through the expensive, costly process of setting up a puppet government, which, as we know, in the occupied regions has been an unbelievably unsuccessful and unbelievably difficult effort, thorn in the Russians' side, is just the incompetence and corruption of these occupation governments. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you to the Colonel tier members, guys like AL90, James Porsche, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, William Alex, Henry Roosier, and all of our Lieutenant tier members. Couldn't do it without you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.